that one a little slower. But where we are here in Mark chapter 14 is the final piece has fallen into place for basically Jesus to be betrayed. You see at the beginning of Mark chapter 14, and we'll read it here. And as you read Mark chapter 14, there's a situation that arises where someone's had enough. And we've probably all been there before, where someone's had enough and they turn traitor. Someone's had enough and you just crossed that line the wrong time, and now they're done and they turned their back on everything that they stood for. And if you look at Mark chapter 14, that's more or less what happens here. You have a woman who comes and she's just trying to do an act of service. She's just trying to do this kind act. She's trying to thank the Lord for what he's done for her. And I want you to notice this, because look what happens. It says, after 2 days, so Mark chapter 14, verse 1, after 2 days was the feast of the Passover and the unleavened bread, and the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might take him by force, by craft, and put him to death. And so Jesus has done enough stuff, as we saw for the past half a year. Jesus has done enough stuff to embarrass these people and show that they're fake, that now they're saying the only way we can silence him, because we can't out-argue him, we can't out-debate him, now the only thing we have left to do is just take him out. So that's the setting. And look what they do. They're looking for a way to kill him. Well, Judas is about to present a way for them to kill him. One of Jesus' closest friends, one of his closest companions, one of the 12, one of the ones that he commissioned to go out and do miracles and do all this stuff. Judas has had enough. And I want you to show you what makes Judas tip over the edge. Because look what happens. It says, but they said, not on the feast day. So we're not going to kill him now, because there will be an uproar among the people. So never mind the fact that we're going to kill him. We just don't want to do it on a certain day, because, you don't break that taboo. Verse 3, and being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as a woman sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment and spikenard, very precious. She brake the box and she poured it on his head. And so, again, they found these boxes before. These are pretty common box that you would have. And this is a very, very valuable bit of ointment. And what she's done is she's collected all this ointment, and it's a huge, huge value. And she's now broken it and just spilled it all over him. And I want you to notice, and it says, there were some that had indignation within themselves. And we know this is Judas primarily, but there's some others who kind of go, why are you wasting your time on this? It says there were some that had indignation within themselves and said, why was this waste of the ointment made? For it could have been sold for more than 300 pence and given to the poor. I want you to think about that. That 300 pence, if you remember some of our terms, that's 300 days' wages. This is a year's salary that she just broke over his head and gave up in one fell swoop. I remember I have a pastor friend who pastors on the East Coast, and their church was growing, and so they decided they needed to build a new auditorium because they were running out of room. And his church is very ministry-minded. They go and they serve the homeless, and they go and they do all sorts of stuff. But someone decided they were going to be snarky, and they were like, oh, why are you building a new auditorium when you could send all that money after the homeless? Well, I looked at the plans, and literally, I'm like, there is no wasted space in this auditorium. Like, you literally dedicated all the space to simply what it's supposed to be. I'm not building like the giant shrine to myself over here. It's literally an auditorium because we need space. And I love the way he responded, because he goes, hey, it's funny, Judas asked the same question. And so there are times where we look at how money's being spent. In this case, she dedicates this to Christ's glory. She pours this money across Christ's head and feet and does all this. And she's simply doing it to honor him, which confidentially, that's why we give. Amen. God doesn't need our money. Like literally all we're doing, and I've given you this illustration before, God puts the money in our hand and we're going, thank you. And we turn around and go, I'll give it to this person on behalf of you. And that's why he says, don't blow a trumpet before you. Don't pat yourself on the back, because he gave it to you in the first place. Whatever talents, whatever gifts you have, they have been handed to you by God, and all you're doing is taking them and going, I'll be the middleman. There you go. Our hands were empty until God filled them in the first place. And he does not need our money. He can do it through someone else, but we get to be the people who get to give. Like, I want us to have that mindset when it comes to the money, because there are times where we're going to look at something and go, oh, that could have been spent better. And it's like, be careful, because Judas actually said that too. Now, I'm not saying don't be mindful of a budget. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying when things are done for the honor and glory of God, there's something intrinsically valuable about those just in themselves. And so I want us to see this because, again, what you see here is Judas is bringing up this statement going, that could have been spent better. But we knew his heart. Judas wasn't really concerned with the homeless. He wasn't really concerned with the lost. He wasn't really concerned with the needy. Judas was concerned with himself. And so again, that's something we have to keep in mind as we go through this narrative, because look what happens. It says, for it might have been sold for more than 300 pence and given to the poor, and they murmured against her. And Jesus said this, let her alone. Leave her alone. She's done a good thing. Leave her alone. Yes, could you have sold this and made money off of it? Yes, of course. But leave her alone. Look what he says. Why do you trouble her? Why trouble ye her? She hath wrought a good work on me. I remember years ago I was working for helping out a church. And it was the last day of the church, and there were rumors that the church was going to shut down after that service. And I'm sitting there and obviously feeling the grief of knowing that this could probably be the last service that we have together as a church, because things had happened and it was basically going to be a 3-week time of deliberating, but we kind of all knew where the direction the wind was going. And that morning when I gave my tithe, so to speak, and I said, I'm giving this to the Lord, knowing that this could be the last service for the church. You know how tempting it was to hold that check back and go, I'm not giving the check today. I'm going to kind of wait to see how things pan out. Then I'll give the check. And what the Lord hit me with that morning was, you're not giving to this church. You're giving to me. And if you give it to me and this church shuts down, guess what? That money is going to go to some other ministry opportunity, and that money will go to you to be used by me in some way or another. Or someone will steal it and they'll be judged. And so what I did is as hard as it was, I was like, well, this church is about to shut down. I'm still going to give, and I'm going to let God take care of this. And so I want us to see that, because what he's doing is God saying, you're giving to me, you're giving to my mission, you're giving to my glory, it's worth it. Money, time, effort, whatever. It's not going to come back as a waste. And look what he says. He says this, for you have the poor with you always. And whensoever you will, you may do them good. Have you thought about that? Here you got a guy, Judas, and what is Judas doing? He's going, you could give that money to the poor. And so Jesus looks at him and basically saying, so why don't you go right now and give your money to the poor? What's holding you back? You see what it is? It's a gut check. One of the sermons this week that just, pegged us all between the eyes was coming down out of Jericho, and you got the Samaritan and the compassion that he had on this person. And the pastor got up and he explained the difference between sympathy and empathy and compassion. He said, there's sympathy and empathy where you feel bad for someone, but he's like, no, but then there's compassion where you actually get out of your seat and you go do something about it. And he was showing the story of the Samaritan, and he said, the Levite and the priest and some of these guys, they probably had some sympathy. They probably had some empathy for this guy who'd been beat up and left for dead, but none of them had compassion. None of them actually got up out of their seat and went and did something about it. They just kind of were like, hope you feel better, sir. Sorry. And he said, who was the one who actually showed compassion? It was the Levite, the Samaritan. The Samaritan actually went and did something about it. And that's what Jesus is saying here. Look what he says. He says, the poor you have with you always. If you ever want to take care of them, it's not hard to find them, so go take care of them. But this, look what he says, but you have me not with you always. She hath done what she could. She has come aforehand to anoint my body to the burying. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she has done shall be spoken in memorial of her. And so Jesus takes this simple gift that would have been wasted on herself over the course of a year or 2 years, making her smell pretty. This gift that could have been used for no shortage of other things, and Jesus says, you dedicated it all to me, and I will not let that go to waste. I will not let that get swept under the rug. In fact, I will make sure I put this right alongside some of the most important events of my life so that you can't not hear about it. This is going to be a memorial for you for the rest of eternity. Could you imagine if you could spend a year's wages to get a memorial to your deed in the Bible forever. You know, I have a rich relative who spent a lot of money to get a wing of a hospital or a college or something built. And you know what happens when people pay to build wings of colleges and things like that. What do? They name it after something that matters to them. So they might name it after their mom or their dad or their grandfather or their cousin or their dog or what. They name it after something that matters to them. And that building, as long as it stands, guess what? It's a memorial to the donation they made. And that's what Jesus is doing here. He says, this is a memorial to her because she prioritized me first. And even as you get into the end times, you see that there's these prayers of the saints they're like incense before the throne. And you're like, a prayer? Really? A prayer is like that big? Yeah. The relationship we're building with Christ, the relationship we have with Him, it's not wasted. And so when we talk about giving, I know there's times where people break out in hives because they think I'm asking you to pull out your wallet. But giving is about much more than money. It's giving your loyalty. It's giving your time. It's giving your wealth. It's giving your heart, your soul, your mind. We just came off of the passage where he says, how do I inherit eternal life? How do I? And Jesus is like, well, do you love the Lord with all your heart and soul and might? You know, he goes through that area. And he's basically just trying to draw their attention to, what are you holding back and why? And we see this demonstration of a woman who says, I don't have a lot. I don't have a lot to give. But what I do have, this box of ointment, I'm going to give it all. And so Jesus is honored by this. And so this is the first point I want you to see, is the heart of a giver. And so that's the heart of the giver. The giver says, I'm willing to sacrifice. The giver says, I'm willing to give. The giver even says, I'm willing to give when people would make fun of me for giving, because I trust the Lord I'm giving to. And so you see the heart of the giver, but in that you also see the focus of the giver. The heart of the giver is one that says, I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to give. The focus of the giver is simply this. I'm not giving to pat myself on the back. I remember hearing I used to listen to a Catholic priest in the morning, and I would just listen to his homilies and just go, okay, I want to hear how he approaches things. And like I've told you before, like 9 out of 10 times, totally solid. But it was that 1 out of 10 times where he would get into things that I would go, ooh, now that is the big difference. And one of the aspects that he got into was, we give to others basically for the idea that our salvation is complete. And it was like, our salvation can't be complete if we don't have people to give to. And it was like, hold on, what? Like, when I give, it doesn't make me any more favored with God. It doesn't suddenly curry God's favor anymore. The Bible says, for by grace are you saved through faith. Amen. And that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. He looks at these really rich people. Remember the story just in the chapters before this, where you got the very rich people who are throwing tons of money into the offering plate, and the little widow comes up with her 2 penny, like her 2 mites, which are these smallest denomination of coins, basically comes up with two like nickels and goes, that's all I've got. And Jesus says, you gave more than all of them. And so Jesus wasn't like magically impressed because someone gave a ton of money. He's like, I don't care about that. I'm looking at the heart. And so we see the giver, we see the focus. But again, our focus is to glorify God, not to earn something from Him. But then I want you to see the response to the giver. And we've already seen some of these responses. One of the responses was, that could have been done better. I could have handled those finances better. I don't like the way you gave that. I don't like what you spent that money on. And you see that right there, where right off the bat, there were several, not just Judas, who had a problem with how the giving was done. And Jesus says, no, her heart was right. No, her actions were right. And I'm going to glorify her for it. I'm going to praise her for it because she glorified me. But I want you to see the response to the giver, and look what happens next. Remember the start of this chapter? Start of this chapter right off the bat said the priests, the rabbis, those guys, they were looking for a reason to kill Christ. Verse 1 introduces the story as they wanted a reason. They were looking for a way to get him. And then I want you to notice verse 10. Look what happens. Bookended on either side of this story is got him. We got him. I was looking for an excuse. And what does Judas do? Judas goes, he just insulted me. He just called me out. He just looked at me and said, if you're so caring about the homeless, go help him. I don't get talked to like that. And look what happens in verse 10. And Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, right after this happens, look what happens. He went unto the chief priests to betray them unto him. It's pretty obvious what happened here. Judas, the guy who keeps the bag, the guy who later on we find out he's the one who's been skimming off the top a little bit when nobody's looking. Judas, who is awfully concerned about money, look what happens. The moment he sees this waste and the moment he's called out for it, guess what? Judas goes, nope, I'm done. Now it's interesting because here's my personal belief. I don't know that Judas realized they were going to kill him. There's certain things that, like the moment they suddenly start going through the death sentence phase, Judas suddenly has a really remarkable change of heart. Like, now maybe it was just conviction finally hitting, but there seems to be something in the narrative where Judas may have thought they were just going to take him down, or maybe they were going to arrest him. But like when Jesus starts getting beaten and about to be put to death, like Judas has a sudden change of heart. So in my opinion, and we can disagree on this, it's fine. I don't know that Judas realized just what they were going to do to him. Judas was concerned about the money. Judas was like, you can pay me off to turn him over to you? I don't care what you do with him after that. Oh, wait, what? No, I do care. Oh. Because he comes back with the money and goes, no, like you can't. But I want you to notice that things spiral out of Judas's control. And look what happens. It says this, and Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went unto the chief priests to betray them. And when they had heard it, they were glad. And they promised to give him money, and they sought how he might conveniently betray him. And the first day of the unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, where will we go that we may prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? And we get into the narrative that leads into the Lord's Supper. But I want you to notice, again, there's a whole narrative here that we're going to skip over for the moment. But I want you to hop down to verse 18. And it says, and they sat, and they did eat, and Jesus says, verily I say unto you, one of you which eateth with me shall betray me. And they began to be sorrowful, and they say one by one, is it I, or another, is it I? And he answered, and he said unto him, it is one of the 12, so it's one of you 12, who's going to dip with me in the dish. The Son of Man indeed goeth as it is written of him. So this is all prophesied. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It was good for that man that he would never be born. And as they did eat, Jesus took bread and blessed and brake it and gave it to him. He said, take, eat, this is my body. Again, we've talked through this, but I want you to hop down to verse 26. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives, and Jesus saith unto them, all of you shall be offended because of me this night. For as it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. And after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. And Peter said, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. And so I want you to see, because we see the gift, we see the heart of the giver, we see the response to the giver, but I want you to see the aftermath of all this. Because what Jesus said, she has done this for my burial. Jesus has just finished saying, when I die, I will come back from the grave. Hey, I'm going to be betrayed. Like Jesus is telling them beforehand all the things that are going to happen, and they don't get it. And I want you to notice how across the board, all of his disciples betray him. And we see Judas betray him because of money. We see others betray him because of fear. We see others betray him because of clout or other things. But all of his disciples run away. And I love what he says to Peter. He says, Peter, verily I say unto you that this day, even this night, before the cock crow twice, you will deny me thrice. Before daybreak hits, you're going to deny me 3 times, Peter. So don't get all uppity on yourself. Don't say, I could never do that. Don't say, I could never fall into that sin. Because guess what, Peter? You're not going to fall into it once. You're not going to fall into it twice. You're going to completely fall in it. 3 times. And we find out elsewhere that he says, hey, I'm praying for you. And I'm going to pray that you're restored. And when you're restored, restore your brother. And I want you to see this. And he spake more vehemently. And he said, I should die with thee. I will not deny thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all. And they came to a place which is called Gethsemane, and he sat there with his disciples, and he said, sit here while I pray. And then look what verse 37. He says, and he cometh, and he findeth them sleeping, and he says to Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Could thou not watch with me for 1 hour? Watch you and pray, lest you enter into temptation. For the spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak. And he again went out and prayed, and he spake the same words, and when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and neither wist they what to answer him. They didn't even know what to say. And he said to them a third time, and he came unto him, and he said, sleep on now, take your rest, it's enough. What do we do about this? What are we trying to say here? Well, we looked at the gift. We looked at the giver. We looked at the response to the giver. We looked at the aftermath. And what I want to do as we close is I want to contrast two things. I want to contrast the giver. This lady that in Mark is unnamed, we get her name from other passages, doesn't matter to what we're talking about. But we get this lady, and she is fully concerned to the point of what someone would call wastefulness. She's fully concerned about the glory and honor of God. That's what she's concerned about. That is her focus. Let me ask you, is that you today? Simple application. Look at your heart of hearts. Look at the giving that you did earlier today. Look at the giving that you're going to do. Are you consumed with giving it to God, or is there some other ulterior motive to why you're giving? God is not impressed with the number of zeros you put on that check. He's not disappointed by the number of zeros that weren't on that check. It's the heart behind it. That's the concern. So that's the first question I have for you. Is your giving, whether it's your time, whether it's your effort, whether it's your intellectual processes, whether it's your money, whatever your giving is it focused on Christ's glory alone, or is there an ulterior motive there? But then, I want you to see this, because again, we get to the point sometimes where we say, I could never do that. I could never fall in that way. We all look at Judas as the traitor. We look at Judas as the great betrayer. Look at the terrible things that Judas did. How many of the disciples betrayed Christ? All of them. Every single one. Every single one of his close companions. Now, did Judas do it a little worse in that he sold him out for a few pieces of silver? Yeah. But I want you to notice this contrast, because Judas said, I don't value you enough to keep you for this little bit of silver. This woman that he looked down on said, I'm going to give you a year's wage without batting an eye. It's an interesting contrast. But look what Peter did. Peter stood before a little girl. I mean, just think about that. Here's Peter. He had to be kind of a burly fisherman type guy with hands that could probably sand wood. I mean, just think about what a fisherman would be like. A guy who builds boats and fixes nets. Like, this is not kind of a weak, namby-pamby guy. This is a strong man. This is a big man, probably. This is a man who's used to traveling through the desert with his master. And he's sitting in the dark by a campfire, and a little girl comes up and goes, hey, you were one of them, weren't you? And he's like, no, of course not. No, I think you, I was most definitely not. How dare you? Before the cock crowed twice, he had denied Christ 3 times to try to get out of trouble. And I just want you to see that every single one of the disciples ran away. The disciples were falling asleep. I love the way one guy put it. He's like, they're almost pictured as the disciples. Like, I mean, just the way that they all just kind of drop the ball repeatedly. And Jesus says, but I care about all of you enough to bring you back. I care enough about all of you to reconcile. But here's the warning. Watch and pray, lest you enter into that same temptation. Lest you enter into that same struggle. We have served a lot this summer. We have served well this summer. We have stood in the heat. We have seen lives saved. We have probably seen souls saved. We've gone into nursing homes. We've gone into all of these places. With all of these ministries, with the hours of driving, with the hours of praying, with the hours of work that we've done. And I know some of you are working full-time, and then you go and do the ministry afterward. And I thank you for it. I have nothing bad to say about you in that way. But my simple question is, with all of this giving, are you doing it solely for the glory of God or not? Why are you doing it? Because you look, and there are times where God gives us a gut check and says, are you doing it for me or not? Do you have the right motivation or not? Have you done all of this for my burial? Have you done all of this for my glory? And I would challenge us, as we go into the fall, we're going to have a busy schedule of ministry. Our church serves the community well, and I'm pleased at that. But are you doing it because it's just expected, or are you doing it because you're saying, I'm doing this for the glory of God alone, because these people need to hear the gospel? And I don't care whether I'm seen, I don't care whether I'm known. This woman, nameless woman in this book, we don't get her name till later. And she just says, I don't care who knows. I'm coming into a house and I'm breaking this vial over him because I want to honor and glorify him greatly. And so my simple question to you this morning is, are you given to the glory of Christ alone? And are you guarding yourself to make sure you don't fall the same way the disciples did? And let me land it on this, because I know I just kind of opened up a grenade and tossed it in. I say this, well, how do I know if I'm on the verge of falling? How do I know if I'm that person who could fall into this? Well, that's the thing, you don't know. You don't know whether you're that person who's on the verge of falling. And the solution is what we started with, which is, whatever I do, I am simply doing for the glory of God alone, and I'm going to let him handle all the other stuff. I started with the verse back before the message started, and I said, cast all your cares upon him, for he careth for you. When it comes to giving, when it comes to praying, when it comes to serving, are you casting all your cares on him and then saying, you got this, Lord. Whatever you decide to do with it, I'm okay with. And you know what? Peter learned his lesson. And Peter then stood before the religious leaders of his day, and he boldly declared the gospel and said, you know what? I'm going to leave this one in God's hands. Paul did the same. James did the same. All these disciples went to their death saying, you know what? God's got this. But they had that one moment of weakness that was shameful for them, and they learned, and they said, I'm not doing that again. You know why Judas never found forgiveness? He went and hanged himself before he could he thought he could take care of the matter on his own. So I challenge you with this. Check your heart. Are you doing things for God's glory alone? Check your heart. Are you on the verge of falling? And then if you have fallen, final application. Just go right back, seek the Lord's forgiveness, and now start living for his glory alone. Living for the glory of God alone cures all of that. Let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, I thank you. I thank you, Lord, for the blessings that you've given to us, Lord. I thank you for this reorientation we can have in our hearts to say, am I doing this for God's glory alone? God, I realize this is just practical nuts and bolts of Christianity. But Lord, I just pray that you would work. I pray that you would be glorified in what's said and done here today. And Lord, I just pray that if there's anyone under the sound of my voice that's yet to trust you as Savior, they don't know what any of this is about. I pray that as we go to potluck or as we fellowship here today, I pray that they would seek you out. They would come talk to one of the deacons. They'd come talk to one of us. Lord, I pray that we would see that soul saved. But Lord, I pray that as we go to our closing hymn, and if anybody needs to, I just pray that they would make this right. I pray they'd check their heart. I pray they'd examine themselves and see whether they truly are doing what they're doing for the glory of God alone. Lord, I know it's a challenge for me. And I thank you for working. I thank you for the great week of camp that we've had, and I thank you for all that we've learned. And I thank you for the blessed servants that you've put in this church. I thank you so much for their heart. I thank you so much for the work that they've done. And I just pray this, Lord, in your name. Amen. We're going to close with 843. The altar's open if you need to. We're going to have time as we head over to potluck and as we just fellowship together, so you don't have to come forward. But this is a challenge that I think we should take with us every single day of the week. A constant recalibration, a constant questioning of ourselves to say, am I doing that for God's glory or not? And it's just a constant reminder of why am I doing this? And so again, 843, our focus is on Jesus, and I'm going to ask you to stand with me if you would. 843, I'd rather have Jesus.